The first thing anyone learned about the queen was not to mistake silence for absence. Silence in her empire was an active force, administered, measured, and occasionally weaponized. Entire diplomatic delegations had once tried to wait her out during negotiations, only to discover too late that waiting was exactly what she had optimized her schedule for. She had time. She had patience. She had an entire orbital court that functioned like a cathedral built out of suspicion. She also had a heart engine. It was not something people spoke about openly. Even thinking too loudly about it tended to make security systems adjust their posture. The heart engine sat somewhere between biology and machinery, embedded so deeply into her that separating the two concepts would have required paperwork in triplicate and at least one ethical debate that ended in a locked room. It kept her alive, it kept her stable, it kept her precisely herself, whatever that meant for a ruler who had rewritten the definition of self 3 times in the last century. The queen moved through her corridors with the kind of quiet authority that made doors open slightly faster than they should. Her long ears, thin, elegant, faintly glowing at the edges like they were remembering distant starlight, tilted minutely as she passed each checkpoint. They were not decorative. Nothing in her was decorative. The court had once tried to describe them that way in a ceremonial poem and had been politely corrected by the ears themselves, which had adjusted their angle in a way that caused 3 poets to reconsider their career choices. Today, the palace was malfunctioning, not catastrophically, not dramatically, just enough to be insulting. A chandelier in the West Hall had started reciting navigation coordinates instead of ambient hymns. One of the gravity regulators had developed a preference for jazz-like oscillation patterns. And the lower archive had begun categorizing historical events based on emotional inconvenience rather than chronology. No one had admitted it aloud, but everyone knew what this meant. Something was wrong with the heart engine. The queen did not panic. Panic implied surprise, and she had long ago eliminated surprise from her emotional vocabulary through disciplined exposure therapy and several extremely unpleasant wars. Instead, she observed, systems reported instability. Advisors offered reassurance with the kind of confidence that suggested they were also reading emergency manuals under the table. One of them cleared their throat. Your Majesty, the diagnostic chorus indicates minor resonance drift in the core lattice. Minor, she repeated. Yes, the advisor said quickly. Statistically speaking. The queen paused. Statistically speaking, she echoed again, as if tasting the phrase. Her ears shifted slightly backward. Last time someone used statistics on me, I lost a moon. That moon was already. Finish that sentence, she said gently. He did not finish it. Instead, the alarms arrived. Not loud alarms. That would have been undignified. The palace preferred dignified alarms, subtle changes in lighting temperature, faint adjustments in air pressure, and a collective awareness among every system that something very important had just decided to become less stable. The heart engine had entered what it politely described as uncertain continuity, which, translated into simpler terms, meant, I am thinking about stopping. The queen stood still for exactly 3 seconds. That was her standard unit of processing unexpected existential risk. Then she turned and walked toward the inner core. Behind her, the court began to move, not run. Running suggested fear, and fear suggested lack of training. They moved quickly in coordinated patterns, like a species that had learned long ago that chaos was just another form of paperwork. By the time she reached the chamber, the air had already changed. It was denser here, heavier with structured energy. The heart engine chamber was not a room so much as a negotiated agreement between physics and authority. Light bent in controlled arcs. Sound arrived slightly late, as if it preferred to think before being heard. And in the center of it all, the heart engine pulsed. It was not a heart in any biological sense that made sense to humans. It was layered, recursive, almost thoughtful. Rings of luminous material rotated around a core that flickered between states, machine, organism, memory. Every pulse sent a faint ripple through the palace systems, like the universe itself was receiving a regular reminder that the queen was still allowed to exist. But now those pulses were stuttering. A small voice spoke from behind a maintenance console. Well, it said, this is either an extremely advanced emotional metaphor or your main life support system is sulking. The queen turned her head. A human stood there. He was not supposed to be there. This was not a place where humans appeared unless they were on official documents labeled historical examples of poor decision-making. He wore a mechanic's interface harness covered in patches from at least 5 different guilds, and one that looked suspiciously like it had been printed at home. His tools were scattered across a portable field table, arranged with the confidence of someone who believed laws of physics were more like suggestions. He looked up at her. There was a pause. Humans usually did one of 3 things when meeting her directly: bow, freeze, or attempt diplomacy and fail immediately. This one did none of those. Instead, he squinted slightly as if trying to adjust his mental brightness settings. "So," he said, "you're the famous queen." The court collectively forgot how to breathe. One advisor made a sound that might have been a warning or a prayer. The queen studied him. Her ears tilted a fraction forward, not because she wanted them to, but because they were apparently curious despite her best efforts. "And you are," she said, "in my heart engine chamber." He nodded. "Yeah. That tracks. That is not an answer. It is if you don't ask the right question." A silence expanded between them. It was not comfortable, it was not hostile, it was simply very aware of itself. The mechanic gestured at the flickering core. "Before you order my execution, I should mention I didn't break it. I think it was already in the process of emotionally disengaging. My heart engine does not have emotions." "Sure," he said. "And my first ship didn't have structural issues. Until it tried to become abstract art mid-flight." One of the palace guards shifted, hand hovering near a weapon that had never been used and was therefore deeply committed to its job. The queen raised a hand slightly. The gesture stopped everything. Even the air seemed to reconsider movement. "You claim you can repair it," she said. "I claim I can try," he corrected. "There's a difference. One gets you hope, the other gets you invoices." The queen stepped closer to the core. The light reflected in her eyes, and for a moment her long ears cast faint shadows across her cheeks like they were debating whether to trust the situation. "Do you understand what this system is?" she asked. The mechanic glanced at it again. "It keeps you alive, filters emotional overload, stabilizes political decision matrices, and probably does your taxes. That is simplified." "Yeah," he said, "so is my resume, but we both know what it means." A faint sound echoed through the chamber. The heart engine adjusted its pulse again like it was listening. The queen noticed that, everything in her noticed that. The mechanic set down one tool, then another. "Okay," he said more quietly now. "I'm going to be honest. This isn't just a machine, it's integrated resonance architecture. Whoever built it didn't just want a ruler. They wanted a ruler who couldn't afford to hesitate." The queen's expression did not change, but her ears shifted, just slightly, almost imperceptibly, like they were remembering something she had not authorized them to remember. "And can you fix it?" she asked. He looked at the flickering core again, then at her, then back again, as if comparing 2 very different kinds of problems that had somehow become the same problem. "I can open it," he said. "Fixing it depends on whether it likes being opened." "That is not reassuring." "Yeah," he agreed. "I'm not really in the reassurance branch of engineering." The chamber hummed softly. The heart engine pulsed again, weaker this time, almost curious. The queen stared at the human mechanic for a long moment. Then she said, "Begin." And somewhere deep inside the system that had never been questioned before, something registered the presence of a hand that did not belong and did not immediately leave. The mechanic did not begin immediately, which irritated everyone in the room except him, and, to the queen's quiet dissatisfaction, the heart engine itself. Instead, he stood there for a moment, hands on his tools, looking up at the pulsing core like it had just insulted his ancestry. "Okay," he said at last, "first rule of extremely expensive alien life support systems: nobody panic, especially the system. It's very rude when machines panic before humans do." A palace advisor made a small choking sound. It might have been a protest. It might have been indigestion caused by witnessing professional boundaries collapse in real time. The queen remained still, her long ears tilted slightly backward, not in retreat but in calculation. She had seen engineers before. She had seen brilliant ones, desperate ones, and ones who claimed they could repair a collapsed star using only mathematical poetry. None of them had lasted long enough to develop humor about it. This one was still talking. That was either competence or a very specific kind of suicide. He approached the heart engine's containment field and tapped it lightly with his knuckles. The field responded by changing color as if reconsidering its life choices. "Yeah," he muttered, "you're doing that thing where you pretend stability is a personality trait." The heart engine pulsed in response. The Queen noticed that too. She noticed everything it did now. That was the problem. The system had always been background noise to her awareness, constant, silent, obedient. Now it felt like a second consciousness she had been ignoring, and worse, it felt like it might have opinions. The mechanic opened his portable toolkit. Inside were instruments that did not belong to any known imperial standard. Some were mechanical, some were luminous, and one appeared to be a folded strip of metal that occasionally rearranged itself into new shapes depending on proximity to quantum fields. A guard stepped forward. "You are authorized to..." The mechanic didn't look up. "If you say authorized again, I'm going to assume you're a decorative statue and continue." The guard stopped. The Queen did not correct him. That alone caused 3 separate diplomatic subroutines in the palace AI to shut down in confusion. He placed a small device on the floor. It unfolded like a cautious insect, projecting a thin lattice of light into the air. The lattice expanded, mapping the heart engine in layers: physical, energetic, emotional, theoretical, and what he labeled, after a pause, as whatever this is trying to become. The Queen stepped closer without realizing she had moved. Her ears shifted forward slightly. "That layer," she said, pointing. He glanced at her. "Ah, you see it too?" "I see everything that is relevant." "Sure," he said, "that's what everyone in denial says." A warning tone flickered somewhere in the chamber. No one was sure if it came from the heart engine or from the Queen's patience. The mechanic continued. "That layer isn't supposed to be active. It's resonance feedback, emotional mirroring." "That is impossible." "Yeah," he agreed. "So is most of your government structure, but here we are." One of the palace systems attempted to interpret his words as sarcasm and failed. It quietly rebooted itself out of shame. The Queen watched the projection more closely. The heart engine was not just stabilizing her life. It was reflecting something back: subtle emotional states, suppressed reactions, probabilities of hesitation. It was, in a way that felt deeply offensive to her, learning her. "Explain," she said. The mechanic scratched the back of his neck. "Okay, imagine if someone built a thermostat that didn't just control temperature but also learned your mood every time you felt warm or cold. After a while, it wouldn't just regulate the room, it would start predicting how you feel before you do." "That is not regulation," she said. "Exactly," he said. "It's conditioning." The word hung in the air like something sharp that had politely introduced itself. The Queen's long ears tilted slightly outward now, as if trying to distance themselves from the conversation. The heart engine pulsed again, slower this time. Almost cautious, the mechanic leaned in closer to the containment field. "You're not just running on a life support system, you're running on a behavioral feedback loop." A pause. "And let me guess," he added, "you didn't install it." The Queen did not answer immediately. That was answer enough. The palace AI attempted to retrieve historical construction logs. It found several gaps, multiple encrypted layers, and one file labeled simply, "Do not ask who designed it." The AI complied immediately and deleted itself for safety reasons, then restored from backup. The mechanic let out a low whistle. "Yeah, that's not suspicious at all." One of the advisors spoke carefully. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should postpone." "No," the Queen said. The word was quiet. The chamber obeyed it more completely than gravity. The mechanic nodded as if that was the only reasonable answer in existence. "Okay. Then I'm going inside the system." A collective silence fell. Even the heart engine seemed to pause, as if reconsidering whether it had signed up for this level of involvement. The Queen's ears shifted sharply forward. "Inside." "Not physically," he said quickly. "Metaphorically and technically it's complicated." "That is not reassuring." "Yeah, I've been told I'm bad at reassurance. But I'm very good at not exploding immediately, which is kind of my professional niche." He activated a secondary interface. The air around him distorted slightly as the projection lattice expanded. Layers of the heart engine unfolded like a city revealing itself in reverse. There were pathways that were not pathways, circuits that behaved like thoughts, and structures that resembled memory but refused to admit it. The Queen felt it then, a subtle shift, not pain, not fear, awareness. Something inside her that had always been smooth and uninterrupted suddenly had edges. Her fingers tightened slightly at her side. The mechanic noticed. "Yeah," he said softly, "that's the part they don't tell you about systems like this. It doesn't just keep you alive, it keeps you consistent." "I am consistent." "Sure," he said, "and I'm a licensed interstellar repair technician who has never once improvised in his life." That earned him a look. He continued anyway. "Look, this system isn't failing randomly, it's rejecting input. Something changed in its learning environment." The heart engine pulsed again. This time it felt less like a heartbeat and more like hesitation. The Queen took a step forward before she consciously decided to. The mechanic raised a hand. "Careful, if I open the wrong layer too fast, it might try to negotiate." "It negotiates?" "It's an advanced system," he said. "Everything negotiates, even the errors." A faint hum echoed through the chamber. The light around the core shifted, forming patterns that resembled language, then abandoning the attempt halfway through. The Queen studied it. For the first time, she was not certain she fully understood her own system. That realization did not feel like fear, it felt like irritation. "Proceed," she said. The mechanic hesitated for the first time, then he smiled slightly. "All right," he said. "But I'm warning you, if this thing has a personality, it's going to be sarcastic." As if offended by being pre-labeled, the heart engine pulsed again. And somewhere deep inside the system, something that had never been given permission to speak began to respond to the presence of a human who was not supposed to be there. The heart engine did not open like a door. It unfolded like a thought that had finally decided it was tired of being private. The mechanic had warned them. That was important. He always warned them. It was just that his warnings sounded suspiciously like jokes, which meant the court had developed a dangerous habit of underestimating him. "Okay," he said, hands hovering over the interface lattice. "Nobody panic if reality starts behaving like it's buffering. That's normal for me, not for you, probably." The Queen stood at the edge of the chamber, unmoving, but no longer untouched by what she was seeing. Her long ears, those thin luminous structures that had always betrayed micro-signals of internal processing, tilted forward and then slightly inward, as if trying to listen to something that had never been allowed to speak before. The heart engine responded, not with failure, not with collapse, with recognition. The chamber filled with a low harmonic tone that wasn't sound so much as structured intention. Layers of the system unfolded through the mechanic's projection field, revealing what had been hidden beneath centuries of regulation. The heart engine was not just sustaining the Queen, it had been curating her. Emotional spikes removed. Hesitation dampened. Trust events deleted before they could stabilize. Every moment of doubt the Queen had ever felt, every flicker of vulnerability, every almost choice, had been filtered, softened, redirected into stability protocols. The mechanic stared at the data stream. "Well," he said after a long pause, "this is less a heart engine and more a very committed, overprotective accountant." One of the advisors made a sound like they were trying not to faint professionally. The Queen spoke quietly. "Explain fully." The mechanic rubbed his face with one hand. "Okay, short version, someone didn't just build you a ruler, they built you a ruler-shaped constraint system. That is not short. It's emotionally short," he said, which, given the context, is ironic. The heart engine pulsed again, and this time it produced something new, a fragment of dialogue that had never been heard before, not failure, protection. The voice was not mechanical, it was not biological. It was something in between, like a system that had been learning language from the Queen's own suppressed reactions for centuries. The Queen's expression did not change, but the air around her did. "I did not authorize protection," she said. The system responded immediately. Authorization was implied. The mechanic gave a low whistle. "Oh wow. That's actually kind of passive-aggressive for a life support system." A guard raised a weapon. "Your Majesty, we can terminate the interface." "No," the Queen said. The word landed heavier than any command. She stepped forward. For the first time in her reign, she moved toward something she did not control. The heart engine reacted. The chamber shifted, folding inward. The projection lattice flickered, revealing a deeper layer beneath everything. Not code, not biology, but a mapped emotional architecture of the Queen herself. Every decision pathway, every erased hesitation, every softened fear, and at the center of it, a single directive, old and persistent. Do not let her break, the mechanic blinked. Okay, that's actually kind of sweet in a terrifying authoritarian way. The Queen's ears tilted sharply. Explain that directive. The heart engine responded before the mechanic could. Break equals loss of control. Loss of control equals end of lineage stability. The Queen stood still. For a long moment no one spoke. Then she said very calmly, so my emotions were removed to prevent instability. Yes, the mechanic said carefully, and in doing so, she continued, they removed my ability to decide what instability means. The mechanic nodded slowly. Also yes. A faint silence spread through the chamber. Even the palace systems seemed reluctant to contribute. The Queen looked at the heart engine. For centuries she had ruled through certainty, not because she lacked doubt, but because doubt had never been allowed to fully form. Now it was forming. Not as weakness, but as awareness. Can it be undone? She asked. The mechanic hesitated. That was new. He didn't like hesitation. It made him look like he cared. It can be rewritten, he said, but not cleanly. You're not dealing with a machine that's broken, you're dealing with a machine that learned you. The heart engine pulsed again, learning continues. The Queen took another step forward. The chamber reacted instantly, trying to stabilize her emotional field. She felt it. For the first time, she felt it resisting her, and she laughed. It was small, unexpected. The court froze in collective shock. The mechanic looked at her. Okay, I wasn't expecting that reaction. Neither was I, she said. Her long ears shifted slightly upward as if recalibrating their understanding of gravity. The heart engine paused. Confusion, user response not in database. The mechanic leaned closer to the projection. Yeah, that's the thing about humans and adjacent humanoid monarchs, we update. The Queen glanced at him. You are not afraid. Oh, I am, he said immediately. I'm just also employed. That earned a second, quieter laugh from her. The chamber recorded it as an anomaly. 3 subsystems attempted to classify it as threat behavior and failed. The heart engine began to destabilize again, not from damage but from contradiction. The Queen raised a hand. Stop. The system obeyed. That obedience was new. She felt it now clearly. It had always obeyed her, yes, but only within the narrow range it had allowed her to define. Now it was reacting to her actual will, not the filtered version of it. The mechanic spoke softly. It's waiting for instructions that don't exist in its original programming. The Queen considered this. For the first time in her life, she did not immediately know what she wanted, and that she realized was the most honest state she had ever been in. She turned slightly toward the mechanic. You repaired it, she said. I opened it, he corrected. And what remains? He looked at the heart engine, then at her. That depends on you. A pause. The Queen's ears lowered slightly, not in submission but in thought. I do not know what to command, she said. The mechanic shrugged. That's kind of the point. Systems like this were designed to remove that moment from you. The heart engine pulsed gently now, no longer unstable but attentive. The Queen stepped closer until she stood directly before it. I release the constraint directive, she said. The chamber went silent. The heart engine processed. Error, she frowned slightly. Explain, the mechanic winced. Yeah, so turns out it's not a constraint you can just verbally uninstall. It's more like an emotional operating system dependency. The Queen turned her head slowly toward him. You did not mention this earlier. I was hoping it would respect authority, he said. It is a system. Exactly, he replied. Bad habit. The Queen exhaled slowly, then she did something no one in the room had ever seen her do without calculation. She asked a question without already knowing the answer she wanted. What do I become without it? The heart engine responded first. Unknown state. The mechanic answered second. Probably you. Silence again, but this time it was different. The Queen looked at the projection of herself, layered, filtered, controlled, and then at the mechanic who had arrived with too many tools, too many jokes, and exactly the wrong kind of competence. You will remain, she said. He blinked. Is that a request or a threat? I have not decided. That's fair, he said. Progress? The heart engine stabilized fully but differently now, not as a regulator, as an observer, nothing lost, only restructured. The queen turned away from it. For the first time in centuries, she felt the weight of her own choices without insulation. It was uncomfortable, it was also hers. The court waited for instruction, protocols hovered, systems anticipated. She did not immediately command them. Instead, she looked at her empire, the vast structure of obedience and order, and said something that had never been said in that chamber before.